The sky over the shopping district in Musutafu did not just turn dark, it shattered like a broken mirror. A noise that sounded like 1,000 screaming voices erupted from the center of the intersection. The asphalt cracked and buckled upward as if something massive was pushing through from underneath. Cars were thrown into the air and crashed into the sides of buildings. The bright neon signs that advertised hero merchandise flickered and exploded in showers of sparks. Panic spread faster than the dust cloud. People did not just run away, they trampled each other in a desperate attempt to escape a feeling of dread that settled in their stomachs. It was not the fear of a villain attack. It was a primal fear that felt like being watched by a predator in the dark. The air grew cold and heavy. It smelled of sulfur and rotting meat. A tear in the fabric of reality opened up above the street. It was jagged and bleeding with a dark red light that made the world look sick. Gravity seemed to stop working for a moment. Debris floated in the air. Then a figure fell from the red wound in the sky. The impact shook the foundation of the city block. A crater formed in the middle of the road, crushing a city bus flat. Smoke and black mist poured out of the hole. From the center of the dust cloud came the sound of heavy breathing. It was wet and ragged. Then came the sound of metal grinding against stone. A massive slab of iron slammed onto the ground. It was too big to be a sword and too thick to be a blade. It looked like a piece of a bridge or a raw heap of iron. A hand wrapped in a metal gauntlet gripped the handle. The man who pulled himself out of the crater was covered in black armor that looked like the shell of a dangerous beetle. He was covered in blood that was not all his own. He had one eye that burned with a white rage. A white patch of hair stood out against the dirt on his face. He tried to stand but stumbled. The weight of his presence made the air shimmer. A group of pro-heroes who were nearby rushed to the scene. They were used to fighting criminals who wanted money or fame. They were not ready for this. Kamui Woods tried to bind the man with his branches. The man did not even look at the hero. He swung his arm and the wooden prison shattered into splinters. The man was not fighting the heroes. He was fighting the shadows. The darkness that had leaked out with him began to take shape. They were not quirks. They were ghosts and spirits with twisted faces. They swarmed around the armored man, biting and clawing at his metal skin. The man roared. It was a sound that had no hope in it. It was just anger. He swung the giant sword. The wind from the swing blew out the windows of the store across the street. The blade cut through the ghosts and hit a building. The concrete wall exploded. The heroes stopped moving. They felt a pressure that pinned them to the ground. It was the feeling of killing intent so strong, it felt physical. The symbol of peace was miles away, but even he paused in his conversation, feeling a sudden chill. The world of heroes where good always wins had just been infected by a world where survival is the only victory. The man in the black armor fell to one knee and vomited blood onto the clean street. The brand of sacrifice on his neck bled and hissed steam into the cold air. The nightmare had begun. The dust from the crater settled slowly on the ruined street. The silence that followed the crash was heavy and thick. Guts stood in the center of the broken asphalt. His chest heaved up and down with every painful breath. He gripped the handle of the Dragon Slayer so hard his metal knuckles creaked. The world around him was too bright. It was filled with colors he did not recognize. The buildings were tall and made of glass and shiny metal. Signs with strange writing flashed pink and blue lights. It looked like a carnival for giants, but the smell was wrong. It did not smell like a carnival. It smelled like fear. The heroes who had surrounded the crater were frozen. They had never seen anything like this man. He was not like the villains they usually fought. Villains in this world wore costumes. They made speeches. They wanted attention. This man looked like he had crawled out of a grave to kill something specific. His black armor was chipped and scarred. It was caked with dried brown blood and fresh red blood. His cape was torn into rags that fluttered in the cold wind. Kamui Woods was the first to move. He was a hero who took his job seriously. He saw a dangerous man destroying the city. He did not know this man was confused or in pain. He only saw a threat. Kamui Woods extended his arm. His arm turned into thick branches of wood. The wood grew fast and wrapped around Guts. It coiled around his legs and his chest. It trapped the giant sword against Guts' back. Kamui Woods shouted that the villain was captured. He told the civilians to stay back. Guts did not speak. He did not know what these wooden things were. In his world, monsters tricked you. They used magic to hold you down before they ate you. He felt the wood tightening. It squeezed his broken ribs. The pain made his vision go white for a second. But pain was an old friend to Guts. He used the pain. He growled low in his throat. It sounded like a wolf growling in a cave. He planted his metal feet on the ground. He twisted his hips. The sound of snapping wood was like a gunshot. The branches that held him did not just break. They exploded. Splinters of wood flew through the air like sharp needles. Kamui Woods yelled in surprise and pain as his arm was shattered. He pulled back, clutching his broken limb. Death Arms saw his partner get hurt. He was a strong hero. His power was super strength. He charged forward. He thought he could knock the man out with one punch. He yelled as he ran to build up his courage. He pulled his fist back. His muscles bulged. He aimed for the man's head. It was a mistake. Guts saw the man coming. He did not see a hero. He saw an attacker. Guts did not dodge. He leaned into the attack. He turned his shoulder so the metal armor would take the hit. Death Arms punched the black armor. A loud clang rang out. It sounded like a hammer hitting a church bell. The shockwave traveled up Death Arms' arm. He felt his own wrist snap. The armor did not dent. It was harder than any steel Death Arms had ever felt. Guts moved instantly. He did not use his sword yet. He used his metal hand. He grabbed Death Arms by the face. He slammed the hero into the ground. The pavement cracked again. Death Arms went limp. The crowd screamed. They were used to seeing heroes win. They were used to fights that looked like wrestling matches. This was different. This was brutal. It was fast. There was no music. There was no posing. Just violence. Mount Lady was standing behind the other heroes. She was huge. She had used her power to grow to the size of a building. She saw the small man take down 2 heroes in 10 seconds. She was scared, but she was a pro. She lifted her giant foot. She planned to kick him or pin him down. A shadow fell over Guts. He looked up. He saw a giant woman towering over him. In his mind, he flashed back to the eclipse. He remembered giant monsters eating his friends. The rage in his gut turned into fire. The brand on his neck began to bleed more. It hissed. The pain meant spirits were near. Or maybe this giant woman was a demon. Guts did not wait to find out. He reached behind his back. The dragon slayer came free. The sound of the sword moving through the air was a deep hum. It was a massive slab of iron. No normal human could lift it. Guts swung it with one hand. He did not aim for her body. He aimed for the ground she stood on. He smashed the flat side of the blade into the street right in front of her giant foot. The force of the impact shook the whole block. The ground rippled like water. Mount Lady lost her balance. She stumbled backward. She crashed into an office building. Glass rained down like a waterfall. She shrank back to her normal size, coughing in the dust. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police cars screeched to a halt at the edge of the destruction. Officer Tsukuchi stepped out. He held his gun tight. He saw the devastation. 3 top heroes were down. The street was ruined. And in the middle of it all stood the Black Swordsman. Guts was breathing hard. Blood dripped from his nose. He looked at the police cars. He saw the red lights spinning. He did not know what they were. They looked like eyes. Demon eyes. A man in a dark jumpsuit landed on a lamppost above Guts. It was Eraserhead. He was a teacher at the hero school. He was smart. He watched Guts carefully. He saw that Guts was hurt. He saw that Guts was protecting his back. He saw the giant sword. Eraserhead thought the man's strength was a quirk. He thought the man's ability to swing that sword came from a superpower. Eraserhead's eyes glowed red. His hair floated up. He used his power. He erased the villain's quirk. Eraserhead jumped down. He threw his capture scarf. It was a strong cloth made of wire and carbon. He expected the man to collapse under the weight of the sword. He expected the man to become weak. The scarf wrapped around Guts' arm. Eraserhead pulled. Nothing changed. Guts did not get weaker. The sword did not get heavier. Guts was just that strong. He had no quirk to erase. He had no magic. He was just a human who had trained until his bones broke and healed stronger. Guts felt the cloth pull his arm. He yanked back. He was stronger than Aizawa expected. Aizawa flew forward, dragged by his own weapon. He let go of the scarf just in time to avoid being pulled into a metal fist. He rolled on the ground and stood up. He looked at Guts with wide eyes. "He has no quirk," Aizawa shouted to the police. "It's pure physical strength. Be careful." The police opened fire. Bullets flew at Guts. They hit his armor with sparks. Some of them hit the soft parts of his body, where the armor was broken. Guts grunted. He felt the sting, but he had been shot with arrows and crossbow bolts before. Small pieces of lead were annoying, but they were not fatal. He pulled his cape around him. The thick fabric blocked most of the bullets. Guts needed to move. He was losing blood. His vision was blurry. He saw shapes in the smoke. The spirits were getting closer. He could hear them whispering. They were laughing at him. He thought the police were possessed. He thought everyone here was a puppet of the God Hand. He had to get away. He had to find a safe place to heal. He reached into a pouch on his belt. He pulled out a small, round bomb. It was a miniature bomb he used for distractions. He threw it at the ground. Boom! A thick cloud of black smoke exploded. It smelled of gunpowder. The police stopped shooting. They could not see anything. Guts ran. He ran faster than a normal man should be able to run. He did not run away from the city. He ran into the shadows. He found an alleyway. He crashed through a metal fence. He jumped over a dumpster. He moved like a wounded tiger. He found a heavy metal door that led to a basement. He kicked it open. The lock snapped. He stumbled inside into the dark. It was a maintenance tunnel for the subway. It was damp and dark. It smelled of rats and old water. It was perfect. It reminded him of the places he used to sleep. He dragged his sword behind him. The metal scraped on the concrete. He walked until his legs gave out. He slid down a wall and sat in the dark. Back on the street, the smoke cleared. The villain was gone. The heroes were being loaded into ambulances. The news helicopters were circling overhead. They were filming the destruction. A young boy named Izuku Midoriya was standing behind the police tape. He was on his way home from school. He had his notebook in his hand. He was shaking. He had seen the whole thing. Izuku wrote in his notebook. His handwriting was messy because his hands were trembling. He wrote, "Villain, no quirk. Sword is too big. Armor is ancient technology. Fighting style is desperate." Izuku had seen many villains. They usually laughed. They usually taunted the heroes. This man did not laugh. He looked like he was in hell. Izuku felt a strange feeling in his chest. It was not just fear. It was sadness. He looked at the blood on the street. It was very dark red. Deep in the tunnel, Guts tried to stay awake. He knew if he slept, the beast would come. The beast of darkness. It lived in his mind. It was the shape of a dog with burning eyes. It wanted him to give up. It wanted him to kill everyone. Guts took off his helmet. His hair was white in the front. His face was covered in scars. He poured water from a small flask onto his wounds. He hissed in pain. He took out a small packet of elf dust he had left. It was glowing faintly. He sprinkled it on the worst cut on his side. The bleeding stopped, but the pain stayed. Guts leaned his head back against the cold wall. He touched the brand on his neck. It was still hot. That meant the monsters were still near. But which ones? Were the people in the colorful suits monsters? They looked like humans, but they had powers. The tree man, the giant woman, the floating hair man. Maybe they were apostles who looked like humans. Guts decided he could not trust anyone. He was alone. Again. He heard a noise further down the tunnel. It was a rat. Guts relaxed his hand on his sword slightly. He closed his one good eye. He needed to think. How did he get here? The last thing he remembered was the ship, the moonlight boy, then a tear in the sky. Griffith was there. Griffith always ruined everything. Guts clenched his teeth. Even here in this strange metal city, he could feel Griffith's influence. He blamed Griffith for this. Above ground, the city of Musutafu was in chaos. The police station was buzzing with phones ringing. Detective Tsukuchi was looking at the footage from the street cameras. He played the video in slow motion. He watched Guts swing the sword. "This is impossible," Tsukuchi said. "The mass of that object, to swing it like that. His muscles must be denser than concrete. But there is no registration for him. No fingerprints match. No face recognition match. He is a ghost." All Might walked into the room. He was in his small, skinny form. He coughed and wiped blood from his mouth. "What do we know, Tsukuchi?" he asked. His voice was tired. "We know he is dangerous," Tsukuchi said. "He took down 3 pros in under a minute. And Eraserhead says he has no quirk. All Might, if this man decides to attack a school or a hospital, we might not be able to stop him without you." All Might looked at the screen. He saw the rage in Guts' face. He saw the white eye. "He doesn't look like he wants to conquer the world," All Might said softly. "He looks like he is running from something. Look at his eyes. That is the look of a hunted animal." "A hunted animal is the most dangerous kind," Tsukuchi replied. All Might nodded. "We need to find him, before he hurts anyone else, or before he gets himself killed." The sun began to set over the city. The shadows got longer. In the dark tunnel, the shadows seemed to move on their own. The spirits that followed Guts were waking up. They were small and weak right now, confused by this new world. But they were hungry. They circled around Guts. They whispered names of his dead friends. "Griffith," Guts whispered in his sleep. "Griffith." Suddenly, Guts woke up. He grabbed his sword. He sensed something. Not a ghost. A person. A real person was in the tunnel. A man was walking towards him. The man had messy blue hair and hands covering his face. It was Shigaraki Tamura. He had been watching the news. He saw the chaos. He was curious. He wanted to see the man who broke the heroes. "Hey," Shigaraki said. His voice was scratchy. "You made a big mess upstairs. I like it." Guts stared at him. He saw the severed hands on the man's body. To Guts, this confirmed everything. This man was wearing human parts. He was definitely a monster. An apostle. "Stay back," Guts warned. His voice was rough like gravel. "You look hurt," Shigaraki said. He kept walking. "Join us. We want to destroy the society too. Master would like you. You seem angry." Shigaraki reached out his hand. He wanted to touch Guts. He wanted to use his decay quirk to see if the armor would rot. He was just testing him. Guts did not hesitate. He did not know what the touch would do, but he knew never to let a monster touch him. He swung the flat of his blade. It was a short, quick swing. It hit Shigaraki in the ribs. Shigaraki flew back. He hit the wall hard. He coughed. He was surprised. He was fast, but this man was faster. "Rude," Shigaraki wheezed. "NPCs are supposed to listen to dialogue." "I don't speak monster," Guts spat. Black mist appeared behind Shigaraki. It was Kurogiri. "Tomura Shigaraki, we must leave. The heroes are searching this grid. This is not the time to recruit." Shigaraki glared at Guts. "Fine. You want to play hard mode? We'll see how long you last. Game over for now." The mist swallowed Shigaraki and vanished. Guts was alone again. He stood up. He could not stay here. They knew where he was. He had to keep moving. He had to find high ground. He had to find food. He walked deeper into the darkness of the tunnels, carrying his burden. The dragon slayer scraped against the floor, a sound that would soon haunt the nightmares of every villain in the city. Meanwhile, at UA High School, Principal Nezu was drinking tea. He was looking at a report on his tablet. The energy readings from the strange event were unusual. They were not just physical energy. They were something else, something ancient. "It seems," Nezu said to himself, "that the rules of our world have just changed. I wonder if our students are ready for a test that is not on the curriculum." Class 1A was in the dorms. They were talking about the news. "Did you see that sword?" Kirishima asked. It was so manly, but scary. "He heard Mount Lady," Mineta cried. "He's a monster." "He had no technique," Bakugo scoffed. He was sitting on the sofa, looking angry as usual. "He was just swinging a hunk of metal. If I fought him, I'd blast him to bits. He's slow." Midoriya looked at his notebook. He remembered the look in the man's eye. "I don't think he's slow, Kachan," Midoriya said quietly. "I think he was holding back." Bakugo stared at Midoriya. "Huh, holding back. He wrecked the street." "He didn't kill anyone," Midoriya said. "With a sword that big. If he wanted to kill them, they would be dead. He just knocked them away. He was escaping. He wasn't attacking." "Whatever," Bakugo grunted. "A villain is a villain. If he shows up here, he's dead." Outside the window, the moon was rising. It looked huge and yellow. But to Guts, who was emerging from a sewer grate on the other side of the city, the moon looked red. He climbed up onto a rooftop. The wind was cold. He looked out over the city lights. Millions of people. Millions of potential enemies. Guts sat down on the edge of the roof. He took a piece of dried meat from his pouch and chewed it. It was tasteless. He missed Casca. He missed his friends. He wondered if they were safe, or if they were lost in the dark like him. He felt the presence again. The shadows on the roof lengthened. Small, distorted faces began to form in the darkness of the corners. They giggled. "Sacrifice," the wind seemed to whisper. "Sacrifice." Guts swallowed the food. He stood up. He grabbed his sword. "Come and get it," he said to the night. The first night in this new world was going to be a long one, and Guts was ready to fight until the sun came up. He did not know where he was. He did not know the rules. But he knew one thing: struggle. That was all he ever did. He would struggle against this world, against the heroes, and against the monsters. He would survive, because that is what Guts does. The act of merely existing in this world was causing ripples. In a hospital room nearby, a patient with a quirk that let him sense danger woke up screaming. He couldn't stop. The doctor sedated him, but he kept thrashing. He was dreaming of a black dog eating the sun. In the mountains, far away from the city, a villain named Stain stopped sharpening his blade. He felt a chill. He looked towards the city. He felt a bloodlust that was purer than anything he had ever felt. It was not the bloodlust of a murderer. It was the bloodlust of a warrior. Stain smiled under his mask. Finally, he whispered, a true conviction. Guts finished killing the small spirits on the roof. They dissolved into black goo. He wiped his sword with his cape. He was tired. His bones ached, but he could not stop. He looked at the tallest building in the distance. It was the UA High School building. It shone like a beacon. Guts didn't know what it was, but he knew that places of power attracted powerful enemies. He turned his back on it. He needed to find the underbelly of this city. He needed weapons, oil, and gunpowder. He climbed down the fire escape. He merged into the shadows of the alley. A group of thugs were cornering a woman nearby. They had knives. They were laughing. They thought they were strong. Guts walked past the alley entrance. He stopped. He sighed. It was none of his business. He should keep moving. But he heard the woman cry. Guts cursed under his breath. He turned around. The metal of his boots clanked on the pavement. The thugs stopped laughing. They looked at the entrance of the alley. A massive silhouette blocked the streetlight. One glowing white eye stared at them from the dark. "Get lost," one thug shouted. "This is our turf." Guts stepped forward. The sound of his armor was heavy. Clank, clank, clank. "I'm in a bad mood," Guts said. He drew the Dragon Slayer. The metal shrieked against the stone. "Run!" The thugs looked at the sword. Then they looked at each other. They dropped their knives and ran. They ran screaming. The woman fell to her knees, crying in relief. She looked up to thank the hero. But the hero was already gone. He had vanished back into the night. He did not want thanks. He did not want a reward. He just wanted the noise to stop. This was the first day. The city of Musutafu had survived the arrival of the Black Swordsman. But the balance had shifted. The line between hero and villain, between monster and human, had just become very blurry. And in the shadows, the true monsters were starting to take notice. The beast of darkness grinned in the back of Guts' mind. It liked this new world. It was full of prey. Rain began to fall on the second day. It was not the clean rain of the countryside, but a grey drizzle that smelled of wet concrete and exhaust fumes. Guts sat inside the shell of a rusted shipping container in a scrapyard near the chaotic Dagoba beach. He had spent the night modifying his equipment. The mechanical arm needed oil. The repeater crossbow on his left arm was jammed with strange dust from his arrival. He sat on a crate, stripping the mechanism down with a small knife. His hands were steady despite the tremors that sometimes shook his body from nerve damage. He had found some tools in the scrap, old screwdrivers and wrenches that were rusted but usable. He needed gunpowder. The cannon in his mechanical arm was his trump card, but he only had one shot left. After that, it was dead weight. He needed black powder, or whatever this world used for explosions. He also needed medical supplies. The elf dust was gone. His ribs were knitting together slowly, but every breath was a reminder of the impact. He wrapped his torso in dirty bandages he had scavenged from a first aid kit in a wrecked car. Guts looked out at the rain. He felt the weight of the Dragon Slayer resting against the wall of the container. It was the only thing that made sense in this world. The metal of the sword was cold and dark, drinking in the little light that came through the rust holes. He knew he could not stay here. The feeling on his neck, the bleeding brand, was a constant itch. It told him that things were watching, not just the ghosts, but people. He pulled the hood of his cloak up. It was tattered and stained, but it hid his face and the metal arm. He strapped the sword to his back. The chains clinked softly. He stepped out into the rain. The scrapyard was a maze of metal junk. He moved through it silently. He was hunting for information. He needed to know who ran the dark parts of this city. In every city, there was a black market. In every city, there was a place where money bought silence. Guts found his way to a seedy bar in the entertainment district. It was barely noon, but the sky was dark with storm clouds. The neon lights were buzzing. He had followed the smell of cheap tobacco and the feeling of malice. He kicked the door open. The bar was quiet. A few men in suits sat at tables. A man with a scarf and sunglasses sat at the bar smoking a cigarette. This was Jiren, a broker for the underworld. Guts walked to the bar. His boots left muddy prints on the floor. The bartender looked nervous. He saw the size of the man. He saw the shape of the sword under the cloak. Jiren turned on his stool. He looked at Guts. He did not look scared. He looked interested. "You're the big news," Jiren said. Smoke curled from his mouth. "The man who smashed up downtown. No quirk registry, no name. The heroes are calling you the Iron Villain." Guts did not care about names. He placed a heavy gold coin on the counter. It was from his world, stamped with the face of a king who was long dead. The gold was heavy and pure. "Powder," Guts said. His voice was low. "Black powder, strong stuff, and metal bolts, short ones." Jiren picked up the coin. He bit it. He smiled. "Real gold, antique design. You have expensive taste. I can get you what you need, but the heat on you is high. Endeavor is looking for you. He is the #2 hero. He is not like the wood guy or the giant lady. He burns things." "I don't care," Guts said. "Get it." "It will take an hour," Jiren said. "Wait in the alley out back. And hey, if you ever want to sell your services, I know some people who would pay a lot for a tank like you." Guts turned around. "I don't work for anyone." He walked out. Jiren watched him go, then pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "Shigaraki? I found him. He's buying supplies. He is not a hero. He's a soldier. Do you want to test him?" "Okay. Sending coordinates." Guts waited in the alley. He leaned against the brick wall. The rain washed the dried blood off his armor. The water turned pink as it ran into the gutter. He closed his eye. He was meditating, listening to the sounds of the city. He heard sirens far away. He heard footsteps. Suddenly, the brand on his neck seared with pain. It was a sharp, hot spike of agony. Guts' eyes snapped open. He grabbed the handle of his sword. The pain was different this time. It wasn't a ghost. It was something dead that was walking. From the roof of the building opposite him, a creature dropped down. It landed on all fours like a gorilla. It had black skin, an exposed brain, and a beak like a bird. It was a nomu, a low-tier one, but still a monster. It screeched. The sound was like metal tearing. Guts did not hesitate. He did not ask what it was. He knew a monster when he saw one. He drew the dragon slayer. The alley was narrow. The sword was huge. Guts adjusted his grip. He would have to use a vertical slash. The nomu charged. It was fast. It punched at Guts. Guts blocked with the flat of the blade. The impact pushed Guts' boots backward through the mud. The creature was strong. Stronger than a human. Stronger than the heroes he fought yesterday. "Ugly bastard," Guts growled. He shoved the blade forward, pushing the creature back. Then he swung. The sword came down like a guillotine. It hit the nomu in the shoulder. The blade bit deep, crushing bone and slicing flesh. Black blood sprayed the wall. The nomu shrieked but did not die. It grabbed the sword with its hands. It tried to pull the blade out. Guts was surprised. Normal things died when he hit them. This thing had no fear. It had no pain response. It was a puppet. Guts pulled a small knife from his belt and threw it. It sank into the nomu's eye. The creature flinched. Guts ripped the sword free. He spun and swung horizontally. The blade smashed the nomu into the brick wall. The wall collapsed, burying the creature in rubble. Before Guts could finish it, a blast of fire erupted at the entrance of the alley. The heat was intense. The rain turned to steam instantly. A man wreathed in flames stepped into the alley. He had a stern face and a beard made of fire. It was Endeavor. "Vigilante," Endeavor shouted. His voice boomed. "You have caused enough trouble. Surrender now, and you will not be incinerated." Guts looked at the fireman. He looked at the pile of bricks where the monster was. The brand was still bleeding. The monster was still alive. "Get out of the way," Guts shouted back. "It's not dead." "I am the one giving orders," Endeavor roared. He shot a stream of fire at Guts. Guts raised his cloak. The fire hit the heavy fabric and the armor underneath. It was hot, unbearably hot. Guts gritted his teeth. He had faced dragonfire before. This was just a man. Guts charged through the flames. He did not attack Endeavor. He ran past him toward the street. He needed room to swing his sword. The alley was too tight for a fight against a fire mage and a monster. Endeavor was shocked. The man ran through his flames like they were nothing. Endeavor turned and chased him. "You cannot escape." They burst out onto the main street. Traffic stopped. People screamed and ran. The rain was heavy now. Guts stood in the middle of the intersection. Endeavor landed in front of him, hovering with fire coming from his feet. Then the pile of bricks in the alley exploded. The nomu jumped out. It was regenerating. The cut on its shoulder was closing. It saw Guts and screeched. It ignored Endeavor. It only wanted the marked man. "What is that?" Endeavor asked. Distracted for a second. "A target," Guts said. The nomu leapt at Guts. Guts swung his sword. This time he put his back into it. The blade hit the nomu in midair. The force was so great that the nomu was battered away like a baseball. It flew across the street and crashed into a parked car. The car crumpled. Endeavor saw the power. He realized the report was true. This man had super strength without a quirk. But Endeavor was the number 2 hero. He had to be in control. "I will handle the creature," Endeavor declared. "You are under arrest." Endeavor shot a spear of fire at the nomu. The nomu shrieked as it burned, but it kept moving. It ran out of the fire, its skin black and peeling, and charged at Guts again. "It doesn't care about your fire," Guts yelled. "It has no mind." Guts ran forward. He was going to cut the thing in half. "Stop!" Endeavor yelled. He did not want a villain killing a creature in the middle of the street. Heroes captured. They did not butcher. Endeavor fired a warning shot of flame between Guts and the nomu. The wall of fire blocked Guts' path. Guts stopped, his boots sliding on the wet asphalt. He turned his head to glare at Endeavor. The white eye was wide with fury. "You are in my way," Guts snarled. "Stand down," Endeavor commanded. The nomu used the distraction. It circled around the fire. It was fast. It jumped on a civilian car where a family was trapped. It started tearing at the roof to get to the people inside. Guts saw it. Endeavor saw it. Endeavor hesitated. He had to aim carefully so he didn't hurt the family. He charged a precise beam. Guts did not hesitate. He did not care about precision. He cared about speed. He jumped through the wall of fire again. His cape caught fire. He ignored it. He landed on the hood of the car. The nomu looked up. Guts raised the dragon slayer high. He roared. It was a roar that shook the windows of the shops nearby. He brought the sword down. He did not just cut the nomu. He smashed it. The blade went through the nomu's head, through its body, and stopped inches from the roof of the car. Blood and black sludge exploded everywhere. It covered the windshield of the car. It covered Guts. It splashed onto the street. The nomu was split in two. Its regeneration could not fix this. It twitched and died. Guts stood on the car, panting. Smoke rose from his burning cape. He ripped the cape off and threw it on the wet ground. He stood there in his black armor, covered in gore, holding a sword that was dripping with death. The family inside the car was screaming. They were not screaming in relief. They were screaming in terror. They saw a monster standing on their car, a monster that had just brutally butchered another monster. Endeavor floated down. He looked at the mess. He looked at the terrified civilians. He looked at Guts. "You animal," Endeavor said quietly. "You could have killed them." "I saved them," Guts said. He stepped off the car. The metal boots crunched on the glass. "Your fire was too slow. You used lethal force in a public area," Endeavor said. His flames flared up brighter. "You are a threat to society. I am taking you down." Guts looked around. People were filming with their phones. They looked at him with horror. In his world, when you killed a monster, people gave you money or food. Sometimes they threw rocks, but they knew you helped them. Here, they looked at him like he was the villain. "I'm leaving," Guts said. He sheathed the sword. It made a wet, grinding sound. "No," Endeavor said. Flashfire fist. Endeavor moved faster than the eye could follow. He appeared in front of Guts and punched him in the chest. The fire explosion was massive. Guts flew backward. He smashed into a bus stop. The glass shattered. He rolled and hit a concrete wall. He coughed blood. The armor had absorbed the heat, but the impact was heavy. His ribs screamed. Guts stood up. He was angry now, really angry. The beast in his head was waking up. It whispered to him, "Kill him. He is just a man. Cut him down." Guts put his hand on his sword. "Don't do that again." Endeavor prepared another attack. Resisting arrest will only make it worse. Suddenly, a knife flew from the shadows. It bounced off Endeavor's flame barrier. Stain landed on a streetlight above them. The hero killer. "Stop," Stain said. His voice carried over the rain. Endeavor looked up. "Stain, 2 villains in one day. I will burn you both." "He is not a villain," Stain said, pointing a blade at Guts. "And he is not a fake hero like you, Endeavor. He is something else. He bears the weight of true conviction. Look at his eyes. He fights to survive. You fight for glory." "I fight for justice," Endeavor yelled. He launched a fireball at Stain. Stain jumped away. Guts used the moment. He did not want to fight a hero and a ninja at the same time. He grabbed a smoke bomb from his pouch. He had 2 left. He threw one. The street filled with grey smoke. Guts ran. He ran into the subway entrance. He jumped over the turnstiles. He went deep, deeper than before. He needed to get away from the lights. Back on the street, the smoke cleared. Guts was gone. Stain was gone. Endeavor stood alone in the rain, surrounded by the gory remains of the nomu and the terrified civilians. The news that night was explosive. Every channel showed the footage. They showed Guts butchering the nomu. They censored the blood, but everyone knew what happened. They called him the berserker. They debated if he was a villain or a vigilante. Most people were scared. His violence was too raw. It was not like the cartoon violence of Quirks. It was medieval. At UA High, the teachers were in a serious meeting. All Might sat at the head of the table. He looked pale. He killed it, Midnight said. She looked sick. He chopped it in half, in front of children. The nomu was a biological weapon, Nezu said. He was drinking tea, but his paws were trembling slightly. It was already dead, technically. But the brutality, it is concerning. This man, Guts, operates on a logic of war. Total war. He saved the family, Aizawa said. He was wrapped in bandages from the day before. Endeavor hesitated. Guts didn't. If Guts hadn't acted, that family would be dead. We have to acknowledge that. He is dangerous, Sementos said. He attracts danger, and he responds with maximum force. We cannot let him roam the streets. We need to talk to him, All Might said. Not fight him. Talk to him. He is lost. He is scared. I saw it. He nearly took Endeavor's head off, President Mike said. He's not exactly the talking type. I will go, All Might said. I will find him. Down in the sewers, Guts had found a dry spot. He was cleaning his armor. He had found his black powder. Kiran had left it in a locker at the station before the fight. Guts had snatched it on his way down. He loaded the cannon in his arm. He packed the powder tight. He put the iron ball in. Now he was ready. He ate a can of cold beans he had stolen. The taste was metallic. He thought about the fireman. The man was strong, but he was arrogant. He thought his power made him right. Guts had met many men like that. They usually died screaming when their power failed them. Guts touched the brand. It was throbbing, a dull, constant ache. It meant the barrier between worlds was thin here. Or maybe the magic of this world was irritating it. He heard footsteps again. Soft ones, not a monster, a human. Guts did not draw his sword. He held his crossbow up. Come out, he said. A young girl stepped into the light of the small fire Guts had made. She had messy blonde hair and wore a school uniform. It was Toga Himiko. She was smiling. She had a blush on her cheeks. Hi, she said. I saw you on TV. You were so cool. So much blood. Guts frowned. Go away, kid. I want to be your friend, Toga said. She twirled a knife in her hand. Stain likes you too. Shigaraki is mad because you broke his toy. But I think you're cute. You look like you're hurting. I like people who hurt. Guts lowered the crossbow slightly. She was crazy. He could tell. She had the eyes of a hollow. I'm not looking for friends, Guts said. Everyone needs friends, Toga giggled. Or allies. The heroes are coming for you, all of them. The big one too, All Might. You can't fight them all alone. Come with us. We have a hideout. It's cozy. I don't group with monsters, Guts said. And you smell like blood. Old blood. Toga's smile faded a little. You're mean, but that's okay. I'll just watch you. Maybe I'll get to stab you later. She backed away into the darkness. Bye-bye, berserker. Guts watched her leave. He put wood on the fire. He was tired. So tired. He wanted to sleep for a week. But he couldn't. He had to keep moving. The fireman knew his face now. The police knew his armor. He took out a small pouch. Inside was a beheaded. The small stone face with eyes and a mouth. It was not his. He was just carrying it. It had been quiet for a long time. But now, in the light of the sewer fire, one of its eyes seemed to open just a crack. It was looking at something. Guts put it away quickly. He shivered. Not here, he whispered. Not now. The catastrophe was not the fight. The catastrophe was the awakening. The world of Quirks was bright and loud. It was full of energy. And that energy was feeding the things that lived in the dark. The things that followed Guts. Above the city, The tear in the sky that Guts had fallen through had closed, but a scar remained, a thin red line in the atmosphere, and from that line a mist was starting to descend. It was a subtle mist. People thought it was just fog, but it made people angry. It made Quirks unstable. In a prison cell, the villain Muscular felt the mist seep through the window. He flexed his muscles. They grew larger than ever before. He laughed. He felt a new power, a power that tasted like sacrifice. Guts slept with his sword in his hand. He dreamed of the eclipse, but in the dream, the faces of the demons were the faces of the heroes. All Might with a demon's smile, Endeavour burning the world, and in the middle of it all, Griffith, shining like a false god, holding the world in his hand. Guts woke up sweating. The sun was coming up. It was day 3. He had survived the arrival. He had survived the first clash, but the war was just starting. He packed his things. He needed to leave the city. He needed to find the woods. He fought better in the woods. He climbed up a ladder to the surface. He emerged in a park. It was early morning. Fog covered the grass. He started walking towards the tree line at the edge of the city. He didn't get far. A figure was standing on a park bench, waiting for him. It was not a hero. It was not a villain. It was a student, a boy with glasses and engines in his legs. Tenya, Ida. He was trembling. He had seen the news. He had seen the violence. And he, in his grief and anger over his brother, who had been hurt by Stain, had confused Guts' violence with Stain's ideology. He thought they were the same. "You," Ida shouted. "Villain, you make a mockery of the law." Guts stopped. He looked at the boy. "Go to school, kid. My brother is in the hospital because of people like you." Ida yelled. He revved his engines. "I will stop you. I am Ingenium." Guts sighed. The steam from his breath mixed with the fog. "I didn't hurt your brother. Move." Ida charged. He was fast. He kicked at Guts' head. Guts dodged. He didn't draw his sword. He just stepped to the side. Ida crashed into a tree. The tree snapped. "You're fast," Guts said, "or you run in straight lines." Ida got up. His glasses were cracked. "Fight me." "No," Guts said. He walked past the boy. "You don't want this fight. You don't know what a real fight is. Go home." Ida fell to his knees. He was crying. He felt powerless. Guts walked on. He felt a pang of pity. The boy was just a child playing soldier. In Guts' world, children like that died first. Guts reached the forest edge. He disappeared into the trees. He felt a little safer here, but he knew it was temporary. The world was closing in, and the Beherit in his pocket was getting warmer. The first major catastrophe was complete. The seeds of fear were planted. The heroes were divided. The villains were circling, and the public saw Guts as a monster. He was isolated, and an isolated struggler is exactly what the God Hand likes to watch. Deep in the void, far beyond the dimensions, 5 figures stood on a hand made of flesh. "He is there," a voice said. "The struggler, in a world of light. Let us see how long the light lasts," another voice said. Femto did not speak. He just watched. He watched the tiny black speck that was Guts moving through the green forest of a new world, and he smiled behind his mask. The stage was set for escalation. The fog in the city grew thicker, and the first true apostle of this world was about to be born, not from a Beherit, but from the mixture of a Quirk and the dark mana Guts had brought with him. A villain was about to change, and Guts would be the only one who knew how to kill it. The forest on the edge of Musutafu was usually noisy with cicadas and birds, but today it was dead silent. The fog that had rolled in from the coast was not natural water vapor. It was heavy and clung to the ground like a spiderweb. It smelled of ozone and old copper. Guts sat at the base of a massive oak tree. He was not sleeping. He was waiting. The fire he had built was small and smokeless. He was oiling the joints of his prosthetic hand. The metal clicked softly in the damp air. His body was a map of pain. The fight with the fire hero had rattled his organs, and the run-in with the nomu had strained his back. But these were physical pains. He could handle them. The real pain was the itching on his neck. The brand of sacrifice was not just bleeding, it was pulsing. It was a rhythmic throb that matched the beat of a heart somewhere in the dark. The veil between layers of reality was tearing. His presence here was like a stone thrown into a still pond, and the ripples were turning into waves. He heard a twig snap. It was not a clumsy step. It was a careful one that had made a mistake. Guts did not look up from his hand. He knew who it was. He had sensed the boy following him for the last mile. The green-haired boy from the news. The one who took notes. Izuku Midoriya stood behind a tree 20 feet away. He was wearing his gym uniform. He was shaking, but his eyes were locked on the swordsman. Izuku had snuck out of the dorms. He had to know. The logic of the heroes made no sense to him anymore. They called this man a villain, but Izuku had seen the footage. He saw the way Guts protected his back. He saw the desperation. Izuku stepped out from behind the tree. He held his hands up to show he had no weapon. Guts ignored him. He wrapped a cloth around his metal fingers. Izuku took a deep breath. He spoke, and his voice cracked. He asked why Guts was running. He asked why Guts fought with so much anger. Guts stopped moving his hand. He looked up. His single eye was cold. He told the boy to go home before the dark ate him. Izuku did not move. He stepped closer. He said that he had analyzed the fight with the nomu. He said that Guts did not use a quirk, but he also did not fight like a normal human. He fought like he was trying to kill something that could not die. Izuku asked if Guts was afraid. Guts laughed. It was a dry hacking sound. He stood up. The Dragon Slayer looked like a tombstone on his back. He walked over to Izuku and looked down. The size difference was massive. Guts smelled of dried blood and iron. He told Izuku that fear was the only thing that kept you real. He said that in his world there were no heroes. There were only those who sacrificed and those who were sacrificed. He told the boy that his fancy powers were just crutches. Izuku looked at the sword. He felt a wave of nausea just being near it. The sword was soaked in so much death that it had a spiritual gravity. Izuku felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. He realized then that Guts was not a villain. He was a survivor of a Holocaust that no one in this world knew about. Before Izuku could speak again, the ground shook. It was not an earthquake. It was a heartbeat. The fog around them swirled and turned black. The brand on Guts' neck erupted with blood. It soaked his collar instantly. Guts fell to one knee, clutching his neck. He gritted his teeth so hard they threatened to crack. He knew this feeling. An apostle was being born. But it was not a normal apostle. It was something hybrid, something wrong. In the city prison known as Tartarus, the alarm system screamed. In the deepest solitary confinement cell, the villain Muscular was screaming too. But it was not pain. It was ecstasy. The dark mist that had seeped into the prison had found him. It found the anger in his heart and the lust for violence. It mixed with his muscle augmentation quirk. The fibers of his muscles began to tear and regrow instantly. They burst through his skin. The containment straps snapped like wet paper. The steel door of his cell bent outward and exploded. Muscular walked out, but he was no longer human. He was a towering mass of raw red meat and exposed bone. He had eyes growing on his shoulders. He had a mouth that split his face in half vertically. He did not want to escape. He wanted to offer a sacrifice. He could smell the brand. He could smell the delicious soul of the struggler. He roared, and the sound shattered the reinforced glass of the prison block. He jumped. He did not use the stairs. He jumped through the ceiling. He tore through 10 floors of concrete and steel until he breached the surface. Guts stood up in the forest. He grabbed his sword. He looked at Izuku. He told the boy to run. He said that death was coming. Izuku felt the air pressure drop. He felt the static electricity on his skin. He looked towards the city and saw a plume of smoke rising from the prison. A red light was pulsing in the smoke. Izuku's phone buzzed. It was an emergency alert. Tartarus breach. Level Omega. Guts did not run away. He started walking towards the city. Izuku grabbed his arm. He told Guts he couldn't go back. The heroes would arrest him. Guts shook the boy off. He said that the heroes could not fight this. He said that their rules did not apply to demons. He started to run. He moved with a speed that defied his heavy armor. Izuku activated his full cowl. Green lightning wrapped around his body. He followed Guts. He could not let him go alone. They reached the edge of the city just as the monster arrived. Muscular had leapt kilometers in a single bound. He landed in the industrial district, destroying a warehouse. The impact created a crater 50 meters wide. Police cars and pro-heroes were already swarming. Endeavor was there. Best Jeanist was there. They looked at the creature rising from the dust. It stood 20 feet tall. Its muscles writhed like snakes. It looked at the heroes and laughed. Its voice sounded like wet gravel grinding together. Endeavor launched a hell spider attack. Threads of concentrated fire sliced into the creature. They cut through the muscle, but the meat did not burn. It just reconnected. The magic in the mist protected it. The creature swung a massive arm. The air pressure alone flipped police cars. Best Jeanist tried to restrain it with carbon fiber cables. The creature flexed and the cables disintegrated. It was not just strength, it was corruption. The cables turned to ash upon touching the creature's aura. Muscular saw Guts emerging from the tree line. The creature stopped fighting the heroes. It pointed a finger made of bone at the Black Swordsman. It spoke one word. Sacrifice. Guts did not stop running. He reached behind his back and drew the Dragon Slayer. The sound of the heavy iron rang out over the sirens. He jumped off a crushed shipping container and launched himself at the giant. He roared. It was the roar of a man who had killed gods. He swung the sword. The blade hit Muscular's arm. Usually, the Dragon Slayer cut through anything, but this time it met resistance. The muscle fibers were dense with dark mana. The sword bit deep but got stuck. Muscular laughed. He punched Guts with his other hand. The impact was like being hit by a train. Guts flew backward. He smashed through a brick wall and into a factory. Izuku watched in horror. He saw the blood spray from Guts' mouth. He saw the armor crack. This was impossible. Guts was the strongest person Izuku had seen physically, but this monster was on another level. Izuku jumped in. He aimed a smash at the creature's head. 5% Detroit smash. He hit the monster squarely in the eye. The monster blinked. It did not even flinch. It swatted Izuku out of the air like a fly. Izuku crashed into the pavement and rolled. His arm was broken. Endeavor saw the boy fall. He screamed an order to the other heroes to cover him. He unleashed a prominence burn. The heat turned the asphalt to liquid. The monster was engulfed in white flames. For a moment it seemed to work. The meat charred. But then, the monster shed its skin. It ripped off its own burning flesh to reveal fresh muscle underneath. It was evolving. It was adapting to the damage. It lunged at Endeavor. Its hand closed around Endeavor's throat. The number 2 hero struggled, but his flames flickered out against the dampening aura of the abyss. Debris exploded from the factory. Guts walked out. He was limping. His helmet was dented. Blood was pouring from his nose and ears. He looked at the monster holding Endeavor. He looked at Izuku, broken on the ground. He looked at the chaos. He closed his good eye. He took a deep breath. He stopped fighting the urge. He let go. The armor began to change. The helmet's jaw unhinged and clamped down. The eyes of the helmet glowed red. The metal plates shifted and bit into his flesh. Spikes drove into his broken bones to hold them in place. The pain was absolute, but the armor removed the mind's ability to process it. Guts ceased to be a man. He became a vessel for the beast of darkness. The berserker armor activated. Guts moved. He did not run. He blurred. He appeared instantly on the monster's arm. He did not swing the sword. He stabbed it. He drove the dragon slayer into the monster's elbow joint. He twisted the blade. The monster screamed and dropped Endeavor. Guts spun in the air. He used the momentum of the sword to flip his body. He brought the blade down on the monster's shoulder. This time, it did not get stuck. The ferocity of the swing combined with the astral weight of the sword severed the limb. The giant arm fell to the ground with a wet thud. The monster stared at its stump. It could not regenerate. The wound was cauterized by malice. Guts landed on the ground. He was on all fours. He growled. It was a metallic, demonic sound. He leapt again. He was a cannonball of black iron. He slashed and slashed and slashed. He was a whirlwind of violence. He did not care about defense. The monster hit him. It punched him into the ground. It stomped on him. But Guts just got up. His armor clicked and snapped his broken legs back into straight lines. He did not feel it. He only felt the need to consume. He jumped onto the monster's chest. He stabbed the sword into its throat. He used the handle as a lever and ripped the throat out. The heroes watched in silence. They were terrified. This was not hero work. This was a slaughter. This was nature red in tooth and claw. Izuku watched through his pain-filled eyes. He saw the black shape tearing the giant apart. He saw the way the blood sprayed and coated the armor. He realized that this was the cost of true power. This was what lay beyond the limits of a quirk. Guts did not stop when the monster died. The creature was a pile of meat, but Guts kept swinging. He was fighting the ghosts in his head now. He was fighting Griffith. He was fighting his past. He turned towards the heroes. His red eyes locked onto Endeavor, who was gasping for air. The beast wanted more blood. It did not distinguish between friend and foe. Guts took a step towards Endeavor. The dragon slayer dragged on the ground, sparking. Izuku screamed. He forced his broken body to move. He used his black whip quirk for the first time in a panic. Black tendrils shot out of his hand and wrapped around Guts' arm. It was a weak hold, but it was enough to make Guts pause. "Stop!" Izuku yelled. "It's over. You won. Don't lose yourself." Guts froze. The voice of the boy cut through the red haze, just for a second. The image of Shirka flashed in his mind. The image of the Moonlight Boy. He remembered he was a protector, not a monster. He fought the armor. He stood shaking in the middle of the carnage. The armor clicked and hissed. The helmet jaw opened slowly. Guts fell forward. He collapsed face first into the blood of the apostle. The sword fell from his hand. The silence returned, but it was different now. The fog had lifted slightly, but the sky was still a sickly grey. The heroes slowly approached the fallen swordsman. They had their weapons ready, but they were shaking. They had just seen a man survive injuries that would have killed all might. They had seen a man butcher a monster that laughed at their strongest attacks. Aizawa limped forward. He used his capture cloth to bind Guts' hands. He did not tighten it. He looked at the armor. He saw the blood leaking from the joints. "Get the medics," Aizawa said softly. and get the heavy restraints. This man, he is not a villain, but he is a catastrophe waiting to happen. They loaded Guts onto a specialized transport. It was a cage made of tungsten. Izuku watched them take him away. He held his broken arm. He felt a change in the air. The fog was still there. It was thinner, but it had spread. He looked at his own hand. The black whip energy was still flickering. It felt darker than before. He looked at the other students who had arrived. Bakugo looked pale. Todoroki was staring at the pile of meat that used to be muscular. The world had shifted. The arrival of the apostle meant that the laws of physics were loosening. Quirks were reacting to emotions in new dangerous ways. The fear in the city was palpable. It wasn't just fear of crime. It was fear of the unknown. In the shadows of the alleyway, the hand of the God Hand was still at work. The beherit that Guts carried was gone. It had fallen out of his pouch during the fight. It lay in the gutter, mixed with the rain and the blood. A hand reached down and picked it up. It was Shigaraki. He looked at the crying face on the stone. He felt the power inside it. It resonated with his desire for destruction. New Game Plus, Shigaraki whispered. He put the beherit in his pocket. The inflection point had been reached. The heroes had guts, but they had lost their innocence. They knew now that there were things in the dark that fire and punches could not fix. They knew that there was a level of violence that was necessary to survive. And they knew that their society was built on a fragile layer of ice that had just cracked. Guts woke up hours later. He was in a white room. He was strapped to a vertical metal slab. Tubes were connected to his veins. He could not move. His armor had been removed. His body was a wreck of scars and fresh stitches. He looked up. He saw a glass wall. On the other side stood All Might in his skeletal form and the principal of Yue Nezu. Nezu pressed a button on the microphone. "Mr. Guts," the mouse bear said, "we have stabilized your condition. Your physiology is remarkable. You should be dead 10 times over, but you are not." Guts stared at them. He did not speak. He tested the restraints. They were strong. "We analyzed the creature you killed," Nezu continued. "Its DNA was human, but altered. It contained energy readings that matched the anomaly of your arrival. We believe you are the source of this corruption." "I am not the source," Guts rasped. His voice was ruined. "I am the reaction. The source is already here. It is watching you." All Might stepped closer to the glass. "What is it, young man? What are we fighting?" "You are fighting the current of causality," Guts said. "And you are drowning." "Help us understand," All Might said. "We want to help you." "You can't help me," Guts said. "Give me my sword. The night is coming, and when the sun goes down, they will come for me, and they will kill anyone standing near me. We can protect you," All Might said. "This is the safest facility in Japan." Guts laughed again. It was a sad sound. "Stone walls, steel bars. It doesn't matter. They come through the shadows. They come through the dreams. Your safety is a lie." Suddenly, the lights in the facility flickered. The backup generators groaned. A low hum filled the air. It was the sound of 1,000 whispering voices. The shadows in the corners of Guts's cell began to stretch. They detached themselves from the walls. "They are here," Guts whispered. The alarm blared. Containment breach in Sector 4. But it was not an external attack. The attack was coming from inside the room. The shadows formed into shapes. Not the small spirits from before. These were larger. Distorted knights. Headless horses. The ghosts of the war Guts had left behind were bleeding into this world. All Might watched in horror as a shadow hand reached out and grabbed the doctor monitoring the vitals. The doctor screamed as he was pulled into the floor as if it were water. "Release me," Guts shouted. "If you want to live, release me." Nezu looked at the chaos. He looked at the readings. The magic levels were spiking off the charts. Logic told him to keep the prisoner secured. Instinct told him that the prisoner was the only predator capable of fighting this prey. Nezu hit the release button. The clamps opened. Guts fell to the floor. He didn't have his armor. He didn't have his sword. He was just a man in bandages. He grabbed a metal scalpel from a tray. He stood up. He faced the shadows. "All might," Guts yelled. "Get the sword. I will hold the line." The hospital was now a battlefield. The escalation was complete. The supernatural had fully invaded the scientific world of Quirks, and the only weapon capable of stopping it was locked in an evidence locker 3 floors down. The chain reaction had begun. Every Quirk user in the vicinity felt the cold touch of the astral plane. Fear became a physical weight, and in the dark, Shigaraki held the beherit and felt it get warm. The stage was set for a choice that would doom one world to save another. The fog outside turned into a storm of flesh and bad dreams. The sterile white light of the recovery room flickered and died, replaced by the emergency red strobes that pulsed like a dying heart. Guts stood in the center of the room, his body a tapestry of white bandages that were rapidly turning red. In his right hand, he held a surgical scalpel. It was a tiny, laughable tool made of stainless steel, designed to save lives, not take them. But in the hand of the Black Swordsman, it was a weapon of war. The shadows that peeled themselves off the walls were not biological. They had no muscles to cut, no arteries to sever. They were spectres of the interstice, drawn to the beacon of the brand. A dark shape with too many limbs lunged at him from the ceiling. Guts did not dodge. He stepped into the attack. He drove the scalpel into the center of the shadow's mass. The steel passed through harmlessly, but Guts poured his own malice, his own spirit, into the strike. The shadow shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and dissolved into black smoke. Guts was panting. The effort of fighting ghosts without a fetish weapon was draining his soul. He could feel the cold touch of the astral world seeping into his bones. His vision was blurring. He needed iron. He needed weight. 3 floors down, All Might was running. He was in his skeletal form, his large suit hanging loosely on his emaciated frame. He coughed, and blood splattered on the linoleum floor. But he did not slow down. The entire facility was in lockdown. The security systems had malfunctioned, locking doors and turning automated turrets against the staff. But the real threat was the pressure in the air. It felt like walking through deep water. All Might reached the evidence locker. The door was made of reinforced titanium. He did not have the keycard. He did not have the time. He summoned the embers of One for All. Muscle fibers swelled in his right arm, tearing the sleeve of his shirt. He punched the door. The titanium buckled and flew inward. Inside, under the harsh light of the containment field, lay the Dragon Slayer. It did not look like a hero's weapon. It looked like a curse. All Might walked over to it. He reached out and grabbed the handle. He expected it to be heavy. He knew the physics of it. But when his skin touched the iron, he felt a weight that had nothing to do with gravity. He felt the screams of thousands of demons. He felt the rage of a man who had been betrayed by God. He felt the sheer, unadulterated hatred that had soaked into the metal over years of slaughter. All Might gasped and dropped to one knee. The sword was pulling him down, not just physically, but spiritually. It was an anchor to hell. "Young Guts," All Might whispered, sweat pouring down his face. "How do you carry this?" He gritted his teeth. He was the symbol of peace. He carried the hopes of a nation. He could carry one sword. He stood up, his muscles straining to the breaking point, and dragged the massive slab of iron out of the room. The tip of the sword gouged a deep trench in the concrete floor. Back in the recovery room, Guts was backed into a corner. The scalpel had snapped. He was using a metal IV stand as a club. The shadows were swarming. They bit at his exposed skin, leaving cold, black burns. A large spirit, shaped like a horse with a human face, reared up to trample him. Guts braced himself. He would go down biting. Suddenly, the wall to his left exploded. Dust and debris filled the room. Through the hole stepped All Might, dragging the Dragon Slayer. He looked like a skeleton carrying a tombstone. He heaved the sword forward, sliding it across the floor. It stopped at Guts's feet with a heavy metallic clang that sounded like salvation. Guts dropped the bent IV stand. He reached down, his hand wrapped around the leather grip of the Dragon Slayer. The change was instant. The air in the room shifted. The shadows recoiled. They knew this scent. They knew this iron. Guts did not smile. He did not cheer. He just exhaled, a long, ragged breath. He swung. The sword moved faster than it should have. It was an extension of his arm, an extension of his will. The blade cleaved through the horse spirit, and the impact blew out the windows on the far side of the room. The spirit did not just dissolve, it was obliterated. "Let's go," Guts said. He stepped over the wreckage. He did not thank All Might. There was no need. They were soldiers in a trench. They fought their way out of the facility. The hallways were a nightmare. The fog had infiltrated the ventilation system. It was affecting the other inmates. Villains with minor quirks were mutating. A man with elastic skin had melted into a puddle of flesh that tried to suffocate the guards. A woman with laser vision was firing blindly, her eyes burning with a red light that was not her quirk. Guts cut them down. He did not hesitate. If they attacked, they died. All Might tried to save the guards, knocking them unconscious. But he let Guts handle the monsters. He saw the efficiency of the Black Swordsman. It was terrifying. There was no wasted movement. Every swing ended a life or destroyed a threat. They burst out of the front doors of the facility into the night. But it was not the night they knew. The sky was a bruised purple. The moon was hidden behind swirling clouds that looked like faces in agony. The city of Musutafu was screaming. The panic had spread. The fog was not just in the prison. It was rolling through the streets. It brought out the darkest impulses in people. Looting had started, but it was violent, mindless looting. People were attacking each other with their bare hands. Heroes were trying to contain the chaos, but they were overwhelmed. Their quirks were acting up. Fire quirks were burning too hot. Ice quirks were freezing the air until it was unbreathable. Guts stopped on the steps of the prison. He looked towards the city center. The brand on his neck was bleeding freely now, staining the bandages. It was pulling him. "Where are you going?" All Might asked, leaning against a pillar, his time limit dangerously close. "To the source," Guts said. "He is here." "Who?" "The Hawk," Guts said, though he knew it wasn't Griffith. Not directly. It was a proxy. A doorway. The one who holds the key. Guts started running. He did not have his armor, only his sword and his rage. He moved through the streets like a force of nature. He ignored the rioters. He ignored the minor spirits. He was hunting. In the center of the devastation, atop the ruins of a shopping mall that had collapsed, sat Shigaraki Tamura. He was alone. The League had scattered in the chaos. Kurogiri was trying to gather them, but Shigaraki had refused to leave. He was holding the Beheret, the small, egg-shaped stone with the scrambled facial features. It was warm. It was vibrating. Shigaraki scratched at his neck. The itch was unbearable, but it wasn't his skin that was itching. It was his soul. "I hate this world," Shigaraki whispered to the stone. "I hate the heroes. I hate the violence. I hate the peace. I want it all to go away." The Beherit's eye opened. It looked at him. A single tear of blood leaked from the stone eye. Guts rounded the corner. He saw the white-haired boy sitting on the rubble. He saw the stone in his hand. Guts froze. The blood in his veins turned to ice. He knew that stone. The egg of the king. The key to the eclipse. "You!" Guts roared. Shigaraki looked up. He smiled. It was a broken, jagged smile. "The player character returns. You ruined my raid." "Drop it," Guts yelled. He charged. He raised the Dragon Slayer. He had to kill him. He had to kill him right now, before the alignment was complete, before the sun vanished. Guts knew the math. One life against the world. It was not even a choice. Shigaraki did not move. He held the Beherit up. "It likes you," Shigaraki said. "It says you are part of the offering." Guts was 20 feet away. He prepared the swing. He would cut the boy and the stone in half. Suddenly, a blur of green lightning shot across the street. Izuku Midoriya slammed into Guts from the side. The impact knocked Guts off balance. The sword swing went wide, smashing into a concrete pillar. "Don't kill him," Izuku screamed. He stood between Guts and Shigaraki. Izuku was battered, his costume torn, his arm in a sling from the previous fight. But his eyes were fierce. "We can capture him. We can't just execute people. That's not what heroes do." Guts scrambled to his feet. He looked at the boy with disbelief. "You idiot! You don't know what he's holding. Move!" "No," Izuku spread his arms. "I won't let you become a murderer. We can save him. We can save everyone." "You can't save him." Guts spat blood. "He is already chosen. That stone. It calls the God Hand. If you don't kill him now, everyone in this city dies. Everyone you love dies." Izuku hesitated. He saw the fear in Guts' eye. True primal fear. He looked back at Shigaraki. He saw a lonely, broken young man. He saw a victim of a cruel society. Izuku's heart, his greatest strength and his greatest weakness, made the choice. He chose to try and save the villain. "I have to try," Izuku yelled. He powered up one for all. Detroit Smash. He aimed a warning punch at Guts to push him back, to buy time for the police to arrive. It was a small choice. A choice born of kindness. A choice born of the values of the hero society. And it was the wrong choice. Shigaraki watched them. He watched the hero defend him. He watched the monster try to kill him. He felt a wave of emotion. He felt seen, but not in the way Izuku intended. He felt the absolute absurdity of the world, the chaos, the pain. He looked at his own hand, the hand that had killed his family. He looked at the Beherit. "I sacrifice," Shigaraki whispered. It was not a scream. It was a statement. The Beherit screamed for him. The face on the stone arranged itself into its true form. The mouth opened wide. A piercing, high-pitched wail erupted from the stone. It shattered the windows of every building in a 5-mile radius. Izuku covered his ears. Guts dropped his sword and clutched his head, the noise triggering the trauma of the eclipse. The ground beneath the shopping mall turned to liquid. Not mud, but a dark, viscous slime. Giant faces molded from the earth rose up around them. The sky ripped open. Not a small tear this time. The entire sky peeled back like dead skin. Behind the purple clouds, a giant red sun eclipsed by a black moon appeared. The eclipse had begun. But this was not the eclipse of Guts' world. This was a mutation. The energies of the Beherit merged with the quirks of the surrounding populace. The fog solidified. The barriers of reality crashed down. Shigaraki floated into the air. The black slime coated him, forming a cocoon. "No," Guts whispered. He fell to his knees. Not again. Izuku looked around in terror. The street was gone. They were standing on a landscape of giant, twisted faces. The heroes who were rushing to the scene, Uraraka, Bakugo, Todoroki, were caught in the transmutation. The small choice to spare one villain had opened the door to hell. Guts looked at Izuku. The boy was trembling, staring at the red sky. "You," Guts growled. He grabbed Izuku by the collar of his hero suit. "You did this. You saved the monster. Now watch what he does." Guts shoved the boy away. He grabbed his sword. He stood up. The despair was there, heavy and suffocating. But Guts was the struggler. He pushed the despair down into the pit of his stomach and set it on fire. The cocoon around Shigaraki cracked. A hand emerged. It was not a human hand. It was long, slender, and covered in black scales. Wings of pure darkness erupted from the shell. Shigaraki emerged. He was beautiful and terrible. He was femto, but twisted by the decay quirk. Everything his shadow touched turned to dust. He looked down at the city. He raised his hand. "Decay," the new Demon King said. A wave of grey energy swept out from the center of the impact. Buildings crumbled into sand. Cars evaporated. People screamed as their clothes and then their skin began to flake away. "Run!" Guts roared at the students. "Find cover. Don't let the light touch you." Guts charged. He ran up the side of a giant stone face. He leapt towards the floating demon. He swung the dragon slayer. Shigaraki merely looked at him. A barrier of invisible force stopped the sword. The impact shattered the bones in Guts' arms, but he didn't let go. "You again," Shigaraki said. His voice echoed in Guts' mind. "You are a glitch in the system, a stubborn pixel." Shigaraki flicked his finger. Guts was blasted backward. He flew through the air and crashed into the ruins of a train station. He lay there, unable to move. Izuku watched it all. He stood amidst the dust of his city. He saw his friends running for their lives. He saw the symbol of peace, All Might, staring up at the sky with hollow eyes, powerless to stop a god. Izuku realized his mistake. He had applied the logic of a comic book to a horror story. He had hesitated. The world transformed. Musutafu was gone, replaced by a hellscape. The laws of physics were rewritten. The age of heroes was over. The age of darkness had begun. And in the center of it all, Guts lay in the rubble, broken but breathing, the only man who knew the rules of this new game. The timeline had fractured. The what-if had become a nightmare. The specific mechanics of the MHA universe, the desire to save everyone, had been weaponized against them. The internal consistency of Guts' world, that mercy to monsters leads to death, had proven true. As the dust settled, the survivors huddled in the pockets of reality that remained. The UA High Fortress was one of them, protected by its advanced barriers, now besieged by demons. Guts dragged himself out of the rubble. He used his sword as a crutch. He spat out a tooth. He looked at the red sun. "Griffith," he whispered, "I know you're watching." He began to walk, not towards safety, towards the dark. He had a war to fight, and this time he wouldn't let any kids get in his way. From the shadows of a destroyed alley, Stain watched. He was bleeding, his arm crushed by falling debris. He looked at the ruin of the society he hated. He looked at the demon in the sky, and he looked at the swordsman. "True conviction," Stain murmured. "The only thing that matters now." Stain drew his katana. He limped after Guts, the hero killer and the Black Swordsman. An unholy alliance forged in hell. The catastrophe was absolute. The hope was gone. All that was left was the struggle. The red sun hung in the sky like a hemorrhaging eye, staring down at the ruin of what was once Musutafu. It did not move. Time had lost its rhythm in the zone of the overlap. The buildings were no longer just concrete and steel. They pulsed. Veins of black cable throbbed along the sides of skyscrapers that had twisted into spirals. The streets were rivers of dry grey dust that whispered when the wind blew. In the center of the devastation, hovering above the crater where the shopping district used to be, was the cocoon of darkness. Inside it, the entity that used to be Shigaraki Tamura waited. He was digesting the world. He was rewriting the laws of physics to suit his despair. Guts walked through the wreckage of a residential block. Every step was a battle. The gravity here was heavy, pressing down on the soul as much as the body. He was not alone. Stain walked 5 paces behind him. The hero killer was limping, his left arm hanging uselessly at his side, crushed by falling debris during the initial transformation. In his right hand, he held a chipped katana. He did not look at Guts. He watched the shadows. They were not empty. Distorted figures, mockeries of human beings, crawled along the walls. There were the citizens who had been too slow, consumed by the mist and reborn as lesser apostles. Guts stopped. He felt the vibration in the soles of his iron boots. A massive shape peeled itself off the side of a melted bank building. It was a nomu, but one that had been touched by the god hand. It had wings of bone and a face that was just a vertical slit of teeth. It shrieked, a sound that made the teeth ache. Stain tensed, raising his blade. He was fast, but against this, he was just a man. Guts did not flinch. The berserker armor was dormant, but the beast was scratching at the back of his mind, begging to be let out. Guts drew the dragon slayer. The sound of the iron scraping the sheath was the only honest thing in this world. The creature dove. It moved faster than sound. Guts swung. He did not aim. He swung where the creature would be. The massive slab of iron collided with the creature's skull. There was no clean slice. The force of the impact shattered the creature's bone armor and turned its head into a mist of black blood. The body crashed into the street, sliding for 50 meters, tearing up the asphalt. Stain watched, his eyes wide behind his mask. He had killed many fake heroes. He had studied the art of killing. But this was not art. This was an avalanche. It was the absolute rejection of the opponent's right to exist. Guts kept walking without checking the kill. He knew it was dead. The Dragon Slayer didn't just break bones, it tore the astral form apart. Stain hurried to catch up. He spoke for the first time in an hour. He asked Guts what they were walking towards. He asked if Guts really thought he could kill a god. Guts didn't look back. He said he didn't care about gods. He said he was going to chop the head off the snake before it swallowed the rest of the world. In the distance, the fortress of UA High School stood like a lonely island in a sea of hell. The barrier systems were active, huge walls of steel and energy rising into the sky. But they were under siege. A horde of demons and mutated villains surrounded the school. They threw themselves at the walls, exploding in showers of gore, only to be replaced by more. Inside the walls, the students of Class 1A were on the front lines. They were no longer children. The last few hours had aged them 10 years. Bakugo stood on the ramparts. His costume was torn, his gauntlets cracked. He fired explosion after explosion into the horde below. His eyes were wild, bloodshot from smoke and strain. He was screaming, not in anger, but in defiance. He refused to die. He refused to let the extras die. Beside him, Todoroki built walls of ice, layers and layers of it, trying to plug the breaches. The ice was stained red. Momo Yaoyorozu was on her knees, creating cannon shells until her skin was pale and her hands shook. She was crying, but she did not stop. They were running out of ammo. They were running out of hope. The sky above the school darkened further. A ripple of force emanated from the floating cocoon in the city's center. It washed over the school's barrier. The steel groaned. The energy field flickered. Then, with a sound like a breaking spine, a section of the wall collapsed. The horde roared. They poured into the breach. Eraserhead was the first to meet them. He stood in the gap, his eyes glowing red, his hair floating. He erased the quirks of the mutants, turning them back into flesh and blood. But there were too many, and some of them did not rely on quirks. They were powered by the abyss. A demon with 4 arms bypassed Aizawa's erasure and backhanded him. Aizawa flew into a pile of rubble and did not get up. The students screamed. They charged forward to protect their teacher. Kirishima hardened his skin to its limit. He threw himself into the jaws of a wolf beast. His armor cracked. He screamed in pain as teeth sank into his shoulder, but he held the beast in place. "Go!" he yelled to the others. "Hold the line!" It was a massacre in slow motion. The heroes were fighting a war they did not understand against an enemy that did not tire. Miles away, Guts saw the barrier fall. He saw the smoke rise from the school. He stopped. He looked at the cocoon in the sky, then at the school. It was a choice. The beast whispered to him, "Ignore them. The hawk is the target. Let the weak die." Guts grit his teeth. He remembered the eclipse. He remembered leaving Casca behind. He remembered the sound of tearing flesh. He would not let it happen again, not while he drew breath. He turned to Stain. He told the killer to go to the school. He told him to do what he did best, kill the ones that got through. Stain looked at the school, then at Guts. He nodded. It was a silent pact. Stain vanished into the shadows, moving with a desperate speed towards the students. Guts turned back to the center. He was going to draw the fire. He was going to make so much noise that the god in the sky would have to look at him. Guts reached for the helmet of the berserker armor. He pulled it down. The world turned red. The pain in his body vanished, replaced by a cold, numbing fire. The armor bit into him. Steel spikes drove into his bones to reinforce them. The jaw of the helmet clamped shut. Guts let out a roar that shook the glass out of the remaining windows. It was not a human sound. It was the challenge of a rabid dog. He began to run. He did not run like a man. He ran on all fours, using the sword as a limb, vaulting over cars and ruins. He moved so fast the wind created a vacuum tunnel behind him. He reached the base of the crater. The ground here was flesh. It was soft and warm. Faces pushed up from the mud moaning. Guts crushed them under his iron boots. He leapt up, driving the sword into the side of a floating slab of concrete. He climbed. He jumped from debris to debris, ascending towards the cocoon. Inside the cocoon, Shigaraki opened his eyes. He felt the gnat coming. He felt the malice. It was familiar. It tasted like home. He smiled. The cocoon unraveled. Shigaraki floated in the air. He had changed. He was no longer wearing clothes. He was covered in a carapace of black midnight matter. Wings of void stretched from his back. His hair was long and white, flowing in an invisible wind. He looked down at the black speck rushing towards him. "You struggle," Shigaraki said. His voice was everywhere at once. "Why?" He pointed a finger. A beam of grey light shot down. It was pure decay. It hit Guts in midair. The armor screamed. The metal began to rust and flake instantly. But the armor was alive. It fed on Guts's blood, and held itself together with magical force. Guts did not stop. He spun in the air, using the momentum of the sword to deflect the beam. The blade glowed white-hot. Guts crashed onto the floating platform where Shigaraki hovered. Smoke rose from the armor. Guts stood up. The cape was gone. The armor was pitted and scarred. Blood leaked from every joint. The helmet's eyes glowed with a feral red light. "Griffith!" Guts roared. The name tore from his throat, bypassing logic. He saw the white hair. He saw the godhood. It was all the same. Shigaraki tilted his head. "I am not Griffith. I am the end of your story." Shigaraki waved his hand. The air turned solid. Invisible cubes of force hammered Guts. He was smashed into the ground. His left arm snapped. The armor clicked, forcing the bone back into place. Guts got up. He charged. Shigaraki sighed. Game over. He touched the ground. The decay spread instantly. The platform began to disintegrate. Guts jumped before the ground vanished beneath him. He was falling. Shigaraki flew down, faster than gravity. He caught Guts by the throat. His hand, with all 5 fingers, touched the armor. "Rot," Shigaraki commanded. The armor groaned. The magic in the armor fought the quirk. It was a battle of concepts. The concept of berserk, to fight until death, versus the concept of decay, that all things must end. Sparks flew. Guts dropped the sword. He grabbed Shigaraki's wrist with his mechanical hand. The cannon was loaded. Click. Boom. The explosion happened at point-blank range. The iron ball smashed into Shigaraki's chest. It blew the demon god backward. Shigaraki crashed into a floating building. Guts fell, catching himself on a gargoyle. He was panting. The armor was overheating. The cannon arm was smoking and useless. He reached out with his magnetic grip and called the sword. It flew from the debris and slapped into his palm. Shigaraki emerged from the hole in the building. His chest was a mess of black gore, but it was knitting together. He looked annoyed. "That hurt. You are actually trying." "I'm going to kill you," Guts growled. "You can't," Shigaraki said. "I am the environment. I am the air you breathe." He raised both hands. The rubble around them began to float. Thousands of tons of concrete and steel. He hurled it all at Guts. It was a meteor shower. Guts swung the sword. Clang, clang, clang. He shattered boulders. He cut through steel beams. But there was too much. A slab of highway hit him. It pinned him to the wall. Another hit him. And another. Guts was buried. Shigaraki floated closer. "It is peaceful in the dark. Just sleep." Under the pile of rubble, Guts could not move. His ribs were powder. One lung was collapsed. The armor was piercing his body in 100 places to keep him moving. But he had no leverage. The darkness was closing in. The beast laughed. "Give up. Let me take over. I will eat him." "No." Guts bit his tongue. He focused on the pain. Pain was life. Suddenly, the rubble on top of him lifted. Green lightning crackled. Guts looked up. Izuku Midoriya was there. He was floating. His body wreathed in Black Whip energy and the sparks of One for All. He was crying, tears streaming down his bloody face, but he was lifting the highway slab. "Get up," Izuku screamed. "Mr. Guts, get up." Guts pulled himself free. He looked at the boy. "I told you to run." "I can't save him," Izuku sobbed. He looked at Shigaraki. "I tried. I looked into his soul. There's nothing left. He's gone." "Yeah," Guts said. He stood up, leaning on the sword. "He chose this. But I can save you," Izuku said. He wiped his eyes. The look of the innocent schoolboy was gone. In its place was the look of a successor. "You can't fly. He can. I'll be your legs." Guts looked at the boy. He saw the determination. It reminded him of Isidro. It It reminded him of the band. "Don't drop me," Guts grunted. Izuku extended his black whip. The black tendrils wrapped around Guts' waist and the handle of the Dragon Slayer. 100%, Izuku whispered. "Full cowl." Izuku launched himself into the air. He pulled Guts with him. They became a human projectile. Shigaraki saw them coming. He laughed. A team-up? How cliché. He unleashed a wave of decay, a tsunami of grey dust. "Smash!" Izuku yelled. He punched the air. The wind pressure from the Delaware smash created a hole in the dust cloud, a tunnel of clear air. They flew through the tunnel. Shigaraki looked surprised. He tried to dodge. "Now!" Izuku yelled. He swung his arm, whipping Guts forward like a wrecking ball. Guts was airborne. He was free. He was closing the distance. The armor tightened. The helmet howled. Guts channeled every ounce of his life force into his arms. The Dragon Slayer hummed. It became enveloped in a dark aura. The weight of the dead. The weight of the sacrifice. Shigaraki panicked. He felt the danger. This wasn't a quirk. This was execution. He tried to block with his wings. Guts swung. The blade hit the wings. It did not cut them. It shattered them. The astral iron tore through the void matter. Shigaraki screamed. It was a human scream. Guts kept swinging. The blade bit into Shigaraki's shoulder. It carved down through his chest. Blood, black and red, sprayed the sky. The impact sent a shockwave that cleared the clouds for a mile. The red sun flickered. Shigaraki fell. He crashed into the crater below. The ground shattered. Guts landed beside him. The armor deactivated. Guts fell to his knees. He vomited blood. He couldn't feel his arms. Shigaraki lay in the mud. He was cut almost in half. He was trying to regenerate, but the wound was festering. The astral wound would not close. He looked at the sky. The eclipse was fading. The giant faces in the ground were melting back into mud. It's cold, Shigaraki whispered. He looked at Guts. "Is this what you feel all the time?" Guts looked at the dying monster. "Yeah. It sucks," Shigaraki wheezed. He laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. Then he dissolved. He did not die like a man. He turned into dust. The wind picked him up and scattered him. The Beherit lay in the mud where he had been. It was stone again. Its eyes were closed. The silence returned. The red sun faded, replaced by a grey, overcast sky. The demons that had been besieging the school screamed and vanished, pulled back into the vortex that Shigaraki's death had created. At UA, the students collapsed. They were alive. Bruised, broken, traumatized, but alive. Stain stood on the wall, his sword dripping with black blood. He looked at the crater in the distance. He bowed his head once, then vanished. Izuku landed in the crater. He rushed to Guts. "Mr. Guts, we need a medic. Stay with me." Guts rolled onto his back. He looked at the grey sky. He felt the familiar ache of survival. He was alive, again. "Kid," Guts whispered. "Yes." Izuku hovered over him, hands trembling. "You did good." Guts closed his eye. He didn't pass out. He just rested, for a minute. But there was no cheering. No victory parade. The city was gone. Thousands were dead. The society that relied on heroes to solve everything had been exposed as fragile. The fog of the interstice had receded, but it had not left. The world was thinner now. Monsters would come more easily. The shadows were deeper. Days later, the recovery efforts were slow. The government had collapsed. Hero agencies were trying to establish order, but the public trust was broken. People were arming themselves. They didn't look at the sky with hope anymore. They looked with suspicion. Guts sat on the steps of the ruined UA dormitory. He was bandaged from head to toe. He was cleaning his sword. It was a rhythmic, scraping sound. Shink, shink. Izuku sat next to him. His arm was in a cast. He was staring at the ground. We won, Izuku said softly. But it doesn't feel like winning. There is no winning, Guts said. He didn't look up. There is only surviving. You wake up, you fight, you sleep. That's the deal. Is it always like this? Izuku asked. Does it ever get easier? Guts stopped cleaning. He looked at the horizon. He saw the scars on the land. He felt the brand on his neck. It was a dull ache now, not a burning fire. But it was there. It would always be there. No, Guts said. It doesn't get easier. You just get stronger. He stood up. He sheathed the sword. The heavy clank echoed in the silent courtyard. What will you do now? Izuku asked. Guts adjusted his cape. It was a new one, made of fireproof cloth Momo had made for him. I'm going to find a way home, Guts said. And until I do, I'm going to kill every monster that crawls out of that hole. He looked at Izuku. The boy had changed. He wasn't the stuttering fanboy anymore. He had seen the abyss. You coming? Guts asked. Izuku looked at his friends inside the dorm. He looked at All Might, who was watching them from the window. Then he looked at his own scarred hands. Someone has to protect the people, Izuku said. The heroes can't do it alone. Not anymore. Izuku stood up. He didn't smile. He just nodded. I'm coming. Guts grunted. He turned and walked towards the gate. Izuku followed. The Black Swordsman and the successor of One for All. They walked out of the safety of the school and into the grey, dangerous world. They walked into the mist. The story wasn't over. The struggle continued. But for the first time in a long time, Guts wasn't walking alone. The camera pulls back, rising above the broken skyline of Japan. The red scar in the sky is still there, faint but visible. The wind blows, carrying the sound of a heavy sword hitting the pavement. Clang, clang, clang. The end of the beginning. It has been 6 months since the event now known as the eclipse of Musutafu. The official maps still show the city as a red exclusion zone, but the reality is that the exclusion zone is expanding. The phenomenon known as the interstice fog has drifted north, covering the ruins of Saitama and touching the edges of Tokyo. The age of celebrity heroes is dead. The Billboard chart was suspended indefinitely after the top ranks were decimated. There are no more talk shows or merchandise deals. There is only the nightly casualty report and the weather forecast, which now predicts the density of spirit activity. Society has adapted, but it is a colder and harder version of itself. People do not look for a symbol of peace anymore. They look for weapons and walls. UA High School operates not as an academy, but as a forward operating base. The students of Class 1A are deployed on rotation. They are soldiers now. They have seen things that no counseling can fix. They fight with a brutal efficiency that scares the older generation. Bakugo Katsuki leads the vanguard, but he does not scream anymore. He fights in silence, and he aims to kill, because he knows that hesitation means extinction. But the most persistent rumors come from the deepest parts of the fog, where the physics of the world are still broken. Refugees speak of a man in black iron who moves like a natural disaster. They say he carries a sword that is too big to be real, and that spirits break against him like water against a cliff. And beside him, they speak of a young man with green lightning who fights with a sadness that is heavy enough to crush the ground. The police have stopped trying to arrest them. The heroes have stopped trying to save them. They are the cleaners. They go where the light cannot reach. In the mud of the ruined city center where the demon Shigaraki fell, a single object remains. It is a small stone egg with a face. It is dormant, but it is not dead. A rat scampers over it and dies instantly. The causality of this world has been permanently fractured. The god hand is far away in the abyss, but the door they opened remains ajar. Deep in the mountains a campfire crackles. Guts sharpens his sword. The sound is rhythmic and eternal. Izuku Midoriya sits opposite him, wrapping fresh bandages around his scarred arms. He writes in a new notebook, but it is not an analysis of quirks. It is a bestiary of demons. They do not speak because there is nothing left to say. The sun goes down and the shadows stretch. The fire is the only light in the world. Guts stands up. He hears the howl of a beast in the distance. He kicks dirt over the fire. Darkness returns. The struggle continues.